Okay, well, thank you very much, and thank you for coming to help us celebrate the life of James R. Alfano. Uh, we realize that we could have probably found a little better place to do this, per se, either on campus or off campus, but it was desire of Karen to do it here because this is the place outside of his home that Jim spent the majority of his time over the past 20-some years. And this atrium was fitting for me anyway, because every time we would walk by, he would hit that little monitor there and change it to the microbiology program. He goes, "We always need advertising." So the reason I say that is I know we're all crowded here, and if anybody wants to, you're welcome to walk up the stairs, and there should be a video coming this way of everyone here. If you wish, just go sit around, stand around the balcony. If not, you're welcome to sit there. The bathrooms in the back, and please feel free to grab some food, and people are coming up. So we'll try to get this going right away, and it's a pleasure to me to introduce our Chancellor, Ronnie Green, who just came back from Wisconsin last night, so we're grateful he was able to make it. And Ronnie.
Well, first of all, Tom, I don't think that there's any way that Jim would have said there was a better place to have it than here. And Karen, so thank you for giving the university the honor of hosting today's celebration of Jim's life. I know there are a lot of colleagues here today who are going to hear a lot about Jim's accomplishments. His accomplishments as a scientist, his accomplishments as an educator, his accomplishments as a leader and innovator in his field, his accomplishments with all the awards that he was able to garner in what was too short of a life. But I want to focus instead on Jim the person. And, I hope I'll get through this. So I got the opportunity to come to the University of Nebraska in 2010. And Jim was 8 years into his career here by that point in time. And he had recently been named in that year as a Bessie Professor, one of the highest honors that the university bestows upon one of its faculty. So I remember very distinctly the first time that I met Jim being in awe of him. And being in awe of someone who would have accomplished by that point in his life what he had accomplished as a microbiologist and as a scientist. And I distinctly remember the first time that he walked into my office, which he did on occasion, both at my invitation and without my invitation. And he walked into my office to talk to me about how we needed to have an undergraduate program in microbiology at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And he had been thinking about that with his colleagues, so many of you around this room today, about that and about what the need for that was in our students and what the need for that was in the education of our student body. And I immediately saw how passionate he was about that, and most importantly, how much he cared about it, how much he cared about the need for this science to be educated to our students and to have them grow up with the opportunity to know and to use this science. I'm going to fast forward to a couple of years later. I can't remember the exact date. I've been thinking about this. I thought about it on the plane home from Wisconsin last night, and I was trying to pinpoint exactly when this was. But it was when I found out that Jim was facing the challenge of cancer. And when he had found out, I think not too long before, and I contacted him and wanted to talk to him about it. And in the course of that conversation, and if most of you know, Jim was very private about this. He was very private about his battle with cancer. But in the course of that conversation, he ministered to me because we had a conversation about how we had both lost our fathers as young men in our lives. I lost my father when he was 58. Jim lost his when he was 50. And we had a conversation about what it was like to be a father facing cancer. and facing what that might be like, the uncertainties that would be associated with that. And I learned then what a powerful person and human being was in my presence. And he ministered to me even when he was feeling the challenge of what he didn't know what might or might not lie ahead for him at that time in cancer. And then throughout the following several years, I distinctly remember, Karen, I wanted to tell you this story because you were there. We hosted a kind of thank you in our home for people who had won awards in the Institute of Ag and Natural Resources. I think this was in 2014 or 15, I don't remember the exact date again. But Jim was one of those people who were there to be recognized. And Jim walked around our house and he looked at the pictures of our children. And he cornered my wife and I. And he wanted to talk to us about how we felt about our children and how we were parents for our children. And if you saw the obituary for Jim, there was something that jumped out of that obituary more than any other single thing, and it was how he was transformed by his daughter, Izzy, and how much he loved and cared for you. You are his light. You are the light that will live on from your dad. Now, I'm going to take a little personal privilege here, Karen and Izzy. I was with the volleyball team yesterday and last night, and I know how big of a fan Jim was, a player he was, how competitive he was. Mike, if you would bring up, the volleyball team sent something for you that's special. So you know, I sat there last night at that match, and I channeled Jim Alfano. And I told the team that. I felt he was there with me, even so much so, and I've got to tell you this story. It's a little bit of a sidelight, I've got to tell you. I'm sitting in the Coliseum in the field house at Madison last night. First, up walks to me one of the intellectual giants in my field, Elton Aberle, who was here formerly in his career. He was the head of animal science when I was a graduate student here at the University of Nebraska. I hadn't seen Abe in 10 years. And he walked up and we had a great conversation about curiosity and science and animal science. I felt Jim there. And then 5 minutes later, Bob Kaufman, who is one of the giants in the animal science field, retired 22 years ago at the University of Wisconsin, walks up to me and said, "Are you Ronnie Green?" He's 97 years old, and he was one of the greats in the field. That's who your dad was, Izzy. He was one of the giants among us, and we will forever miss him. Please come and get this. So on behalf of all of the University of Nebraska, Karen, we are with you. We mourn your loss. Jim was a fabulous human being. He was a giant in my life and a giant amongst all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor. I don't know if I can get through that one either. Next up, Mike, please. He's a plant pathologist too, so these guys are a close-knit group.
Yeah. Wow. I hope I get through this. For those of you who know me, usually not short of words, I wrote out my comments so you can read them if I have to bail. Izzy, I've not really ever met you, but like your mom and dad, I am a plant pathologist, and I've been following both your mom and dad's careers for the last 25 years or so. We kind of grew up professionally, I'd say, Karen, huh? Your dad and I received our PhDs within a year of each other. Ironically, that was the same year that the internet was invented, so I guess that makes us kind of old. And while I didn't work with your dad closely, our paths kind of crisscrossed over the last 30 years or so. I interviewed your dad, your dad interviewed me. It's kind of a funny journey. And so it's from that perspective that I want to share with you today. As an aside, your mom and dad and I were in graduate school at a really cool time, no question, when the tools of modern molecular biology and molecular genetics and their use by plant pathologists was relatively a new thing. I'm not sure really how to best describe it, but it was kind of like watching The Wizard of Oz. When Dorothy opens the door of her house after landing in Oz, there were just so many colorful and amazing things like nothing she ever saw, and that was the way plant pathology was back then. I first met your dad after starting my postdoc in Oregon, and he was just in the state to the north finishing his PhD. And the first time that I met your dad, I knew that he was going to make a difference to our science. There was no question about that. Well, at Washington State University, your dad studied the complex relationships, I called it the dance, between nitrogen-fixing root bacteria and legumes or beans. He went off to Cornell for a postdoc, and if I'm not mistaken, that's where he met your mom. Well, at Cornell, he worked with another amazing scientist named Alan Colmer, who I guess is here. Alan, thank you. Well, at Cornell, your dad pivoted from working on a beneficial plant-bacterial interaction and decided that he would help unravel the mystery of how plant pathogenic bacteria make plants sick. In 1996 was the second time that I met your dad in all places of Columbus, Ohio, when he was being interviewed for a faculty position, not just in one department, but two departments, the Department of Micro and the Department of Plant Pathology. And I was just a brand new assistant professor. But I remember vividly listening to your dad learning about something called type 3 secretion systems. Probably doesn't mean a lot to a lot of you, but Jim was that giant in the field. Again, I was really impressed with your dad. And I said to myself, his research was going to reshape our understanding of how bacterial pathogens make plants sick. In 2000, your dad made another important change when he left the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, to join the faculty at UNL. One thing I learned about your dad is he had a great sense of humor. And I remember him saying about this move that he was going to gain a lot more greenhouse space, but he was losing some entertainment opportunities. It turns out that your dad's move to UNL was a really good decision as his science flourished here. In layperson's terms, your dad was a pioneer in understanding how proteins and other large or complex molecules produced inside the bacterial pathogen were passed from inside the bacterial cell to moving inside the plant cell, something that's really complicated. I think this would be like me giving you a soccer ball at one end of the soccer field and saying, Izzy, go score. But here's the hitch. The other 21 players on the field are trying to stop you. In short, your dad figured out this puzzle, and it was an amazing feat. In short, Izzy, your dad Jim was a pioneer in exploring this complicated dance at the molecular level. He studied this dance in great detail and helped the entire world actually understand this dance for the very first time. He opened our eyes as to how being in contact with a plant cell could actually lead to a bacterial pathogen causing disease. Really important and cool stuff, I might add, for a plant pathologist. He and his students discovered many things for the first time that nobody had ever figured out. Big discoveries, and I won't bore you with those details today, but you can read about them. In short, Izzy, your dad rocked, period. He was a pioneer, a giant, a world-leading expert in plant microbe interactions. He expanded our understanding of these complicated interactions and unraveled the mystery of how bacteria make plants sick. While others will speak to these aspects of your dad and the impacts he made on science, during his short time here, please know that your dad was an amazing advisor, mentor, coach, and friend to his team, his students, and in short, your dad knew how to build, nurture teams to bring out the best in others. In closing, I want to end by sharing that your dad was recognized with many honors and awards that I too, as Ronnie mentioned, know paled in comparison to being your dad. One of these awards was being named the Charles Bessey Distinguished Professor here at UNL. Turns out that Charles Bessey was also pretty famous and innovative, like your dad, but it was way back in the 1800s and 1900s. Bessey was a botanist, and he studied plant diseases of all things. So how fitting that your dad held that same named professorship. I want to read just a little about Bessey from the archives of our university. He took his research very seriously. He saw the university as a kind of research center where scientific experiments searched out fundamental principles underlying natural experience. He strongly believed that education was to be oriented towards research. As a professor, Bessey was known for his wonderful teaching methods and was widely acclaimed as being a favorite among students. Bessey's shadow since has fell on the university. Bessey's shadow certainly has fell on the university for the past century, Izzy. But like your dad, Karen, like your partner, and like our colleague Jim, he will be missed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. The next one up is Tiffany Hang Moss, and she's going to articulate kind of Jim's more academic side of things and how we try to build and strengthen our undergraduate education.
Thanks, Tom. Well, today we celebrate the life of an amazing individual. Jim was a mentor, colleague, and friend to so many of us. He led by example. Jim was one of those individuals who inspired and taught us to strive to become the best of ourselves in all ways. And for that, we are forever indebted to him. He was a visionary, a strategic thinker, always curious, determined, and passionate. Jim was recognized around the world for his expertise in understanding plant-microbe interactions, as we've already heard. His scientific discoveries and contributions will endure and continue to exemplify the very best in science. Future generations will benefit immensely from his work, just as I know my students and I have always gained from our interactions with Jim. Leading a top-tiered research program wasn't Jim's only goal. The undergraduate microbiology degree program was also a priority for him. He was instrumental in the development of this interdisciplinary degree program and served as the coordinator for the past 7 years. During this time, the program grew from just 5 students in the fall of 2012 to now over 100 students. And I remember Jim always telling me, Tiffany, we're gonna get to 200. And I'm like, great, Jim, let's go with that goal. I'm confident that the microbiology program would not be what it is today if it weren't for Jim's creativity, innovation, and dedication to our students and the program. Jim was also an amazing mentor and advisor. He generously shared his knowledge, expertise, time, and talent with his students. During his tenure, he had a far-reaching impact through his advising on both undergraduate and graduate students, mentoring postdocs, and serving on numerous graduate student committees. We and our students at the University of Nebraska are very fortunate to have crossed paths with him. Jim was also an amazing colleague, and he committed to the success of every member of the team. No matter how busy he would always take time to listen and mentor. One of the many examples of this was Jim taking time this October. When most would have only focused on their own health, he took the time to submit an award nomination for a colleague. That was just the kind of person that Jim was. When called upon, you could always count on him. While all this was important to Jim, the most important thing was his family. His face always lit up when talking about Izzy. Izzy, your dad and I would start every conversation catching up on what was going on in your life. Sometimes at the office, but sometimes at the village while you were practicing soccer and my children were there too. The focus was usually on sports and how well you were doing because you were always the best, right? Your dad was so very proud of you, and you and your mother were the center of his universe. Thank you.
Next up is our director of our Center for Plant Science Innovation, Edgar Cahoon.
So I'm very honored to speak today on behalf of the Center for Plant Science Innovation about Jim, our very dear friend and colleague. And Jim was an early member of the Plant Science Initiative when he came in 2002 to UNL, and he was a founding member of our Center for Plant Science Innovation. And Jim was always very dedicated to PSI and was really key to our success. And as Tiffany said, he really led by example, and we really valued that leadership that Jim gave to us. And I have to say, like Ronnie said, Jim was never afraid to come and talk to me and, and offer his opinion about anything. And despite what Tom always told me, I listened to Jim. And in fact, you know, when I had a tough situation and I needed some sage advice, I would turn to Jim and ask him his opinion. And I valued that because Jim was a very honest person. He didn't tell me what I wanted to hear. He told me what was really on his mind, and I really value that. And so Izzy, your dad, he really was a great scientist, as you've heard, and we know this from the legacy of his great publications and from all of the well-trained people that went through his lab, and the fact that he was a fellow of 3 different societies. And he was also a leader of our Center for Root and Rhizobiome Innovation. And this was very important to Jim. And I remember very vividly standing here, I think in 2015, and Jim was so proud of that day, and he gave a great talk. And that was, I think, a happy day in his life, his professional life. And probably nobody knows this, but this name, Center for Root and Rhizobiome Innovation, came from Jim. Fred Schubiner, and I were in a conference room talking about the grant, and we were debating what the title would be, and Jim said, what about the Center for Root and Rhizobiome Innovation? I said, perfect, and we went with it. Okay. And for Jim, it wasn't just important to publish papers. And Jim really wanted to have his work mean something, and he really wanted his lab to do significant things and move the field forward. He just didn't want to publish for the sake of publishing, and that was very important to him. And I think one of the take-homes from Jim's life is that he was always dedicated to excellence, and that he really believed in doing things the right way. And I have to say that over the past few years, I had the opportunity to collaborate with Jim, and we're really from different disciplines in the plant sciences, but being close together in the Beetle Center really brought us together, and we could share our ideas. And we worked on a project that involved selective autophagy, which is something that was perfectly new to both of us. And I don't know why we got into that, but I think Fawn, his student, was really the culprit, but okay. And so Jim and I, we put together a paper that was published this year, and Jim was so proud of that manuscript, and I think that he thought it is going to be something, that meaningful paper that I think that will really be important for the field. And we also wrote a grant proposal together that just almost got funded. But I remember one thing that about an hour before it was due to the Office of Sponsored Programs, he said, Ed, could you write a paragraph about selective autophagy to put into the proposal? So I didn't get upset. I just took it in stride, and I was glad that there was Wikipedia there to be my guide. Yeah, so, but what he helped me remember is that the importance of a deadline and how you can really be inspired by a deadline. It's something I really knew before him, but he helped remind me. And I spoke to Karen a couple weeks ago, and she mentioned to me what a fighter Jim was, and that really was true. And just maybe a few weeks before his passing, Jim was texting me saying, "We got to resubmit that grant proposal." It was amazing. And he got to the point where he relented he said, "Maybe you could be the PI." And that was a big concession for Jim. Okay, so, and last October, a delegation went to China, and Jim came along, and we really didn't appreciate how Jim was feeling. And it was a tough trip for Jim, but he gave a beautiful talk in China, and there were so many people, there was really a buzz about it, and people were saying, what a great presentation he gave. And I know that the paper that's going to come from that presentation is going to be a magnificent paper, and really another one that will really solidify Jim's legacy as a great scientist. And before I close, I've told people about my bike riding experiences with Jim. And soon after Jim was diagnosed with cancer, he really wanted to stay in shape, and keeping in shape was very important to Jim, and I will always remember him as a robust fellow. And so I told him I like to ride the bike, and he told me, let's ride together. And so he shows up in his racing road bike, and with his fancy shorts on and his bike shoes, and I'm in just a cheap hybrid bike with baggy pants on and tennis shoes. And so he told me, pretty soon that if we're going to ride together in the future, maybe I need to up my game. And that's what I loved about Jim. And I listened to him, and I did. But it was a really great experience to get to know Jim on a more personal level by doing this. And every time I put those Lycra shorts on, and no, it's not a pleasant experience to think about, but I think of Jim. And Jim, someday I'll get the right pedals for the bike. I promise you. He would always tell me that I need the right pedals. Okay, so again, that just reiterates the fact that Jim really believed in doing things the right way. Yeah. And so PSI will work with Karen, and we really want to maybe do something meaningful for Jim's memory. And we hope maybe to work with plant pathology and have maybe an annual seminar in honor of Jim. And we hope that this will help keep his legacy alive, and it will go well beyond his time on Earth, and that a next generation of scientists that didn't really know Jim personally will get to know Jim through this seminar series. Thank you.
Okay, so next up is we all are in our careers, no matter whether you're an academia or non-academics, we have mentors. And next up is a key mentor in Jim's career, and somebody that he spoke of very highly and quite often, Alan Colmer.
Thank you, Tom. To say in the beginning, this is going to be hard to get through. However, I really appreciate your comments, Chancellor Green. You so captured the heart of the mature giant as a person that Jim was. I mean, that's really, truly who he was. And I had just the remarkable gift that I'll be grateful for my life of being able to experience year after year the emergence of those wonderful properties that Jim had. Jim came into my lab in 1993, fresh from his PhD at University of Washington, or Washington State. And this is for his postdoctoral work. He arrived in March in a Jeep with a big dog named Jake. And a car totally unsuited for the windy, cold Ithaca world. And he was this tall guy with this smile that could light up a room, and this just eager, youthful, energetic enthusiasm. And one of the first things we did was to meet in my lab to talk about scientific literature. Now, as you know, Jim was a tall and very athletic person, very strong. This was a time in science when there were strange things being discovered, strange, mysterious similarities between the attack systems of human pathogens and plant pathogens. And so it was important to really keep on top of a broad literature. And so I had this great literature management system on my computer. And I had a big, tall file cabinet with all these references. And so I was very proud of this, and I proudly showed Jim how my system worked and how you could find a paper and then, with a number, then pull out a drawer and get out the right paper. So we did this and pulled out the second to the top drawer. In the back, there was this paper, and this will be a good one to start reading, Jim. And then looked up in my computer system, here's another one, and showing how great my system was, I pulled out the top drawer, at which point the whole file cabinet started toppling, and Jim, of course, saved the day. And that, kind of became the paradigm for the rest of our life together. A lot of excitement and fun, and a lot of saving each other in different ways. Jim, of course, was a great positive force in the department. He started a March Madness NCAA basketball pool, and he often won, but he was always embarrassed about it. But it was a great thing in the department. But he also had all these interests in novels and films and music, and he just had these really broad interests. And he was a great scientist. He made amazing discoveries, and basically we were all working very rapidly in many labs, putting together this giant puzzle about this what turned out to be this injector system that injected virulence proteins into plants and animals. He put some major pieces of the puzzle in place. And as we were doing this, we began to realize how useful it would be to inform sister disciplines of these advances that were being made with plant pathogenic bacteria. And so we wrote a series of review articles addressed for plant biologists or medical microbiologists or these different communities. And I want to say that I had always taken writing to be really seriously. Ever since high school, I've been sort of obsessed with good writing. And so we would work together on these and divide up the labor of writing sections. And I found myself soon, with my writing, trying to meet Jim's standards. And at that point, I knew that our field had a new giant in the works. Jim was kind of like this powerful racehorse in the lab, and but he also had this other dimension which always surprised me, and it was kind of this very sensitive, aware, caring, and as a friend, that is what really meant so much to me. And it turned out that there was somebody else in the department who I think also noticed that. In around 1990, I was on the graduate student selection committee, and we received this remarkable application from this student who had been raised in Suriname and had gone to this tiny college that we'd never heard of, Warren Wilson College in Swannanoa, North Carolina. But there was something about this application that was so remarkable. The letters were so detailed and telling, and it was clear that this person had a remarkable science training. And so we enthusiastically recruited this Karen Van Dyke, and it turned out that she was everything that we had expected. She was a fantastic student, and Jim also felt the same, I think. So Jim finished in '97 with his postdoc. He got a job at UNLV, and then Dr. Van Dyke joined him there, and they pursued their career there for a while. So he founded his independent lab there, and I guess in '98, Candace, my wife, and I went on sabbatical at a research institute in Norwich, England. And Jim had noticed that I always brought to work on a rainy day this old blue umbrella with the spokes kind of sticking out. And so he got me a proper, he remembered that, and he got me this proper British black umbrella, which I used a lot. But then in 2000, our careers joined again. When we got a large multi-institutional grant, a $5 million grant from NSF involving 9 co-PIs to sequence this bacterial pathogen and use the sequence to find these effector protein genes that for these proteins that were being injected into plants. And it was the first project to be funded by the NSF, or National Science Foundation, Plant Genome Research Program. And given it was a plant program, I think they were a bit worried about funding a microbe pathogen project. And so they had us come to Washington, all of us, all 9 of us, for a so-called reverse site visit to make sure that we were up to the task. And it was kind of scary, because I think that they would have liked to not fund us in a way. So we had to prove ourselves. So as the principal investigator and organizer, I arranged for the hotels. So we had this hotel we stayed in near NSF. And I think the meeting was like Monday afternoon and then Tuesday morning. And some people were already in the area, so they would arrive Monday morning, and then I booked the hotel for them for Tuesday night. Others came from further afield, and so they stayed Sunday night as well as Monday night, okay? Of course, I had a system for keeping track of this, always the system. And the system indicated that Jim was arriving on Monday. So I booked this hotel for Monday night. And he did arrive Monday, but at 12:05. Okay. So I had failed to pay attention to that little detail. So when he came, he teased me about having to stay on a park bench, but it eventually worked out, and NSF was satisfied, and we did get our funding. But then the really important part started with actually doing the work. And anybody who's been involved with a large project knows that there's always a few people who turn out to be the savers, the workhorses that make everything happen. And Jim was certainly that. I mean, he was just such a wonderful presence in all of our meetings. But he was also, he produced between 2002 and 2007, a remarkable 21 publications he contributed to. And I think the success of that project was really important for the whole larger community. When the project, that phase ended, then funding patterns kind of changed, and our lab focused more on the disassembly of the effector gene collection. And his lab then did this amazing work of figuring out biochemically what these effector proteins were actually doing inside plant cells to basically defeat the plant defense system. And that was just a remarkably powerful and beautiful work. And it is the work that he's largely remembered as now, as a total giant in the field. In later years, Candace and I felt really lucky to be able to see Karen and meet Izzy at a lab reunion that we had in 2015. And then a year later, when we came and visited the Lincolns and see the cranes and everything. And it was really wonderful seeing Jim, the father, and and just, he was always talking about Izzy, and it was really great to meet Izzy too. And he had a lot to be proud of. When the word went out around the world that Jim's lost, there was immediately this strong response from so many different places around the world. And they basically, the responses, sort of two themes. I mean, one is just what a giant he was scientifically. But there were also so many comments from so many different people about how just fundamentally kind and caring Jim was. And, just one particular that I just happened to, pull out here said that I was introduced to him by a colleague when I was a young PhD student. I was amazed he was happy to talk to me since I was so junior, and I was so in awe of him. But that was who he was, such a friendly, nice, kind mentor. And, that's the thing that's, so hard. I mean, Jim will be missed enormously for his science. But for what he was, for who he was as a person, he will be missed just infinitely more. So we're really our whole community is just really dealing with just a terrible loss. So I think I'll stop.
Please continue to eat, okay? When people are talking, you can still eat. It's all right. We got a lot of food over there. We want to get it done. As I mentioned, my name is Tom Clemente, and I'd have to admit that Jim was probably one of my closest colleagues and friend here at the University of Nebraska and in my life. And when we walked together, we were kind of like the odd couple. He was Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I was Danny DeVito. Yeah, so I first met him when he came here to interview. And he walks in, his seminar was up here in E228, and he comes walking in with these yellow-tinted sunglasses. He had some type of eye procedure beforehand. And I remember just looking at him going, man, this cat thinks he's like Bono from U2 giving this talk here. Well, he gave a great talk. He really did. But I was tasked to transport him here from the Beetle Center over to East Campus so he can meet the faculty and the galactic overlords on East Campus. And so I had an old Volvo at that time. It was a great car. The engine was of high quality, but the interior was kind of destroyed a little bit. And then at that time, I was doing a lot of cigars. And so my car stunk. The ashtray was filled with, I used to smoke those Churchills, so just big stogie in there. Half of one burnt because I always used to smoke them on the way to work. And then the ceiling little liner was falling down. So Jim gets in the car, the thing's bouncing on his head, and the car stunk, and I knew he was just like totally disgusted. But we're driving over East Campus, and we started chatting. And he's asked me where I was from, and I told him I was from a small town in northeastern Pennsylvania, Kingston, Pennsylvania. He says, well, my father grew up in Pittston. And so Pittston and Kingston are about 5 miles apart. So if any of you folks have Netflix, there's a movie called The Irishman. And Joe Pesci plays a guy named Russell Buffalino. Well, Mr. Buffalino ruled the roost, and he was the real deal. So his home was in Kingston, Mr. Buffalino, but his command central was in Pittston, and this guy was in charge. So Jim, we had this little camaraderie, this like connection that way. Anyway, he was hired. And so he comes on board, I was about 6 months later, and he was probably one of the first hires from what was then our Plant Science Initiative. And I was in the east wing over here of third floor, and Sally McKenzie was in charge of the whole operation, and she had this plan of how people were going to be worked together and aligned. So she moved me over to the east wing, and Jim, he had to have that corner office on the east wing. There was no way in hell he was not going to have that corner office. So the first battle, Jim and I battled a lot. Now, we battled mostly about the politics of academia. We both saw things the same way, but we had different strategies to how to accomplish the goal. You know, there's a lot of things like that in society. So Jim, he added that corner office. Oh, you can have the corner office, man. That's all you. But then he insisted on putting a centrifuge in my space. And I'm, okay, man. And so, you know, Jim, he's a thing for space. So he got it in there. Sally approved it, and that was one of the first fisticuffs I had with Sally, too, but nonetheless. So it's about a week later, I go, I'm going to get this guy. So I went and got a tape measure. And he still had an empty lab waiting for some equipment to come in, and I was measuring out stuff, and he's going, what are you doing? I go, well, Sally said as a compromise, I can put a Percival here in this footprint in your lab, and since you put the centrifuge in mine. He's going ballistic up and down, and I knew Sally wasn't going to be around for the rest of the afternoon. And so he was fuming the whole day. And then finally when he saw Sally goes, hey, I don't know what you're talking about. He's just pulling your leg. Jim Lee slams his door, come walking, he sticks his head in my office. He goes, you're a Weasley little man. So, oh, man, I got him excited. So I had to go. I went by his house. Oh, man, I had everybody, a little bit too much. I said, come on, man, calm down. So we went and got one of those butter burgers at Culver's. Now, if you ever want to calm somebody down, you put one of those that's like one big Valium. Put down a double-stacked butter burger. So we're all good there. Yeah, so Jim, he had this dog when we got here. He really wanted another, what was Jake? What the hell? It was a Ridgeback. He wanted another Ridgeback, but Karen blew it. She didn't send in the check in time. So we ended up getting Tucker. Tucker was this dog that was half visual, half lab, a big old dog. And Karen and Jim, their first house they had was down on Kirkwood. Beautiful area of town, and you really can't get a bad area of Lincoln. Lincoln is just a wonderful town, no matter what neighborhood. But anyway, this is like, small little neighborhoods. And these guys, they redid their whole big deck. Jim had a big jacuzzi in the back, put in new floors. And one of the last things they did is they put all new windows around the perimeter of the house. And so it was done on a Wednesday. He goes, come on over. Saturday, we'll put some salmon on the grill, and this. And I go, okay. So I bring over a couple bottles of wine. I had a bottle of Chianti and a bottle of Pinot. So what you want to do is you always start off with Chianti because that kind of rises you up, and you end it down with Pinot when you want to slow down. So Shirley and I, we got out of the car, and I walked up in the front lawn, and the windows looked great. He had them all open. It's a spring day, wind going through. And I yelled, Tucker! This dog came barreling through the house, right through the screen, ripped it in half. Jim, a giant man, filled the screen. You asshole. I didn't need to, oh, man. I had to run up there, and I had to switch the tactics. We started off with the Pinot to calm him down. So if you want to mix it up, it's the butter burgers and Pinot. You'll be out for at least 3 hours. Now, Jimmy, as Alan alluded to, Jim, when he got focused on something, he was like a laser beam. And one of the things he started getting into was how to pack better. He bought a book, How to Pack. He wanted to see how much clothes he can put in a piece of carry-on luggage and stuff in the overhead. He's one of the guys, when you can walk in, he was the bin hog, this boom, big dude, and all this stuff. So he buys this book and stuff like that. And at that time, maybe 2005, 2006, Jim won some award for the American Phytopathological Society, and another colleague of ours, Marty Dickman, which when we got here was Marty and his wife Dwana, Karen and Jim and Shirley and myself. We hung out a lot. And some of you may know Marty passed away within a year ago, so I lost two very close colleagues in the past year. Been a bad year, yeah. Anyway, so these guys both won this awards on Marty. I forget what his was for. I forget what it was. Anyway, but the meeting was in Honolulu that year. So let's go. We rent a house. We rented a house on Waianae Bay. And if you ever go on the Oahu, it's the greatest beach, right by Bellows Air Force Base. Beautiful area there. We rented a house right on the beach. These guys didn't attend one of the meetings much, but they got their awards and came back. And it was all done. And so we had to get out of the house by about noon. And so, if you're going to Hawaii, you fly back to the States, it's always the red eye you come back. So we had a lot of time left over. And so we're waiting outside, and if anybody knew Marty Dickman, very impatient man. He was like a big me. He's kind of barking a lot. So he looks at me and goes, "Where the hell's Alfano?" So I go inside. There's Jim's got this piece of luggage, and it has like this fan little thing where he's one by one putting his pieces of clothes in there and pressing them down. And I look at him, are you kidding me? And Jim was the type of guy, he didn't care what you thought of him. Most people you meet in life, they don't do what they believe in. They do what's most convenient, and then they repent. Jim wasn't like that. He did what he believed in, and he didn't care what you thought of him. He took the minority position. It was fine. It's very easy to be on the side of who's winning. But Jim didn't care. He always thought what was in the best interest for him and best interest for the people around him. And that's one thing why I liked him. Yeah. I can tell one more story. I wasn't sure if I'm going to do it, so Ronnie may get upset with this one. So, Jim, he battled this thing, man, like you would never believe. And the first battle he took, he was going to go to California to get some target radiation and thing, and his sister Mary Ann got him a house, and he had to be down there for about a month, so he wanted to take his car there. So we were driving. Jim always planned everything. So we're driving across this country in his Honda Pilot. He had it all planned out. We're staying here, his hotel, and this. Oh, man, I'm not like that. Let's just pack the bags and go. So we get into Denver. Outside of Denver, Jim's driving, and at that time, it's right when Colorado passed recreational marijuana. I go, Jim, I got to see one of these dispensaries, man. You got to pull me into this place. Okay, so we go in there. It was like a surreal moment for me. I'm looking around, I can't believe it. And I go, Jim, you may get some nausea from this stuff. You may want to get some of these chocolate chip cookies or these gummy bears. He goes, I don't like that crap. I go, Jim, dude, if you don't want it, you never know. If you may need them, throw them away. Okay. So we get $150 for these couple gummy bears and a thing like that. Most of it was taxes. We get in the car. He's still driving. He's getting something in his back latch. I rifle 3 of these gummy bears. I'm sitting in the front seat. We get through Denver, and we get to this exit at Golden, Colorado. Maybe traffic and stuff like this. Took about 45 minutes. He pulls in to get some gas. He goes, Tommy, you just got to drive. We got to get to this Idaho Springs, and that's why I got a hotel. We're staying there. I look over at him. He looks down. He goes, you're stoned. I go, man, those gummy bears are great. There's no way I'm driving. He goes, you're an asshole. We ended up staying in Golden, Colorado, and we stayed in some place like it reminded me of a Jimmy Buffett tune. You could put a quarter in the bed, and they gave you the little finger massage. Man, was he pissed. Anyway, we got there, and he got back, and it's the end of the thing, like I said, Jim's focus and his energy, what he did in his life was what he brought to this lab. And every publication you had, you can write it in stone because he wasn't, he just would not let anything out that wasn't solid. Everything checked and double checked. There's just no doubt about it. And so when you read his publications, you could take it to heart. But more important to him was his family. When him and Karen got together, she ruled the roost, When she used to point her finger at him like this, it would remind me of the Flintstones. Remember when Mr. Slate used to give a lecture to Fred and he'd shrink down in the chair, like that, But his most pride and joy was Izzy. And he just talked about sports because he knew the importance of teams and what sports activities does for people. It teaches you how to lose. It's very easy to win. But the sign of a true champion is how you handle defeat. He also knew the important thing in sports is it builds a self-confidence and that inner strength. And it's that inner strength you get from sports that nobody can ever take away from you. It builds that resilience that allows you to survive in tough situations. And that's what Jim knew about athletics, and that's why he instilled upon his daughter to maintain that effort in that arena. I'm going to miss you, Goomba. I'm going to miss you. But I think it's time we all take those words of Warren Zevon, and you enjoy every sandwich. Thank you. Who's next? It's a wonderful day in the neighborhood. Okay, we're going to have, Howie, sorry, you're next. No, Candace, some students. I get mixed up. See, I'm all confused. We're going to have some students that come up. Former students of Jim, Anna Joe, Tanya, come on, no? Oh, separately. I'm confused.
We are not planning anything. Hi, I'm Anna Jo. I'm previous Jim's graduate student. I'm now the postdoc in University of California, Davis. So Jim, to me, is an amazing scientist and also mentor. I really loved his class, Microplant Molecular Interaction. That is one of my favorite class, and I learned a lot from the class. And he always bring the new great science and listen news to us in the lab meeting and also journal club we have every week. And if we go to the conference, he always introduces us to other great scientists. And it was a really good opportunity meeting scientists and learn a lot of science and also new field. I learned that not every advisor do that to graduate students, but he gave us a lot of opportunity. And he also never hesitate to spend his time to help us get our career development. And he is not just a good mentor for science, he also good mentor for our life. And I remember my first time I met Jim. So when I applied grade school, he invited me to his office and interviewing me. And I just came from Korea. I don't know how you are familiar with the Asian culture, but we never look at the senior's eye contact. So I look at his hands, and he wasn't really comfortable with that, so he just tried to get eye contact, and he kept coming to my face like this close. And that time I learned that, okay, America, I needed to learn. So he tried to teach us the American culture to international students. I appreciate it a lot. And also, the Jim is very adventurous. So he did a lot of outdoor thing and sports. And he is very proud of his picture in his office. If you have been in his office, you can see he wearing blue padding jacket on the Half Dome Yosemite. So he told me the story. So I think that it's 7 or 8 miles up, and you need to go up the big rock with the cable. So I think he went there during the winter time, no cable, so his brother living in Yosemite, he helped him. He said brother guided him because Jim is still baby brother. So I think he is proud of that. He is going up to the Half Dome, but also proud of his brother, so his love. So that inspired me. So last few years I went to Half Dome twice. I'm always thinking about him. And also he tried to teach us how to fight against the world, how to get in good science and also career, and also to be very strong. I wrote him email a couple of months ago. I wish he's getting well. He wrote back, I'm fighting a bit. So I guess he fight until his last moment. I know it is for him, by himself, not just by himself, also his family, Karen, Izzy, and other loved one, also lab members. For holiday, I used to send him chocolate box from California, and this year there is no gym, so I like to give you this to Izzy and Karen. Thank you.
So next is Tanya Torino. Both her and Anna Jo kind of graduated at the same time and both went to California.
So, hi everyone, my name is Tania Toruño, and I was a PhD student with Jim from 2008 till 2014. So I have a lot of memories of Jim, and there's one that really impacted my life. So before I was applying to grad school, I did an internship in Ohio, and I was introduced to this beautiful world of MPMI, molecular plant microbe interactions. And when I was looking for schools to come and labs to join, he was one of my top 3. And so back then I wanted to do my master's, and I contacted him, and he said, I'm not really interested in master's students, but I was like, okay, it's a bummer, but I have the opportunity to come to UNL. And I remember meeting him at an MPMI meeting in Sorrento in Italy, and I was like really impressed with his personality. He was like really friendly. He was like very excited and wanted to help me coming to Nebraska without even knowing me. So he said, so if you come to Nebraska, don't forget to stop by my office and tell me how you're doing. And I came to Nebraska, and of course, I didn't go to his office. But then things didn't work out in my first lab, and I came to his office, and I was like looking for an advice of how to work my project out, and he was giving me a lot of advice. And then he asked me something that changed my life. And he said, "Are you happy?" As simple as that, "Are you happy?" And long story short, he let me join his lab, and I'm really grateful because he taught me right there that we not only have to look for a place that will scientifically challenge, a good place for, to develop professionally, but to take care of like our mental and physical health. He cared for us. He was always there listening to us. His office was always open for every little thing that we had. He was a good listener. He gave us amazing advice. He challenged us a lot. He pushed us to give seminars every single year in the department. And he wanted us to be good professionally and also as human beings. And I really liked that as an international student, I never felt that I was different. He was always open and willing to listen and like welcome us to the Midwest. It was a cultural shock for me, but he made me feel home, and it's really hard for me to come back to Nebraska and not having him around. But I am very, very lucky that he was part of my life, and I will try to take his legacy, everything that he taught me, not only scientifically, but personal, and as he liked to say, go big red.
Next is the current member of his lab, Pena Kim. Come on, Pena.
Hopefully I can get through this. My name is Panya Kim, and I started my PhD program from 2012 through 2017. I'm still here as a postdoc in his lab. So I knew that he was suffering really hard for his last moment, but I couldn't really feel this is the real until now. So it was really hard time to give a little speech for him or remembering his life. When I first, actually my first meeting with him was over the phone interview. He just called me with, I got the phone number which was a unknown number, so I was almost to refuse it. But suddenly I just picked it up and it was like a Dr. Jim Alfano. I was surprised because I was waiting for a couple more acceptance in back 2012 summer. And when he was talking over the phone with me, he was like kind of a hilarious person. He was making a lot of joke for me because he just thought I was very embarrassed over the phone interview. So he just made me like felt comfortable throughout those interview progress. And then of course I came to the Nebraska to really meet him individually, and I was shocked again because he was too tall. I never met the person who was that tall. So that was my second impression of him. Yeah, and then throughout all my life in here, he actually changed me a lot. I had a little hard time in my master period, and then luckily I got into Jim's lab, and at the moment I had one kid already, and during my PhD program I had another baby coming out, so I raised two kids, beautiful kids, under his big, huge support. Our previous lab member already told him how great he was a scientist and how was a great mentor. So I want to share a little bit of how he was a great friend with me. So every morning, before we discuss about the science, we always talk about some very chatty things about Easy or my kids. So how they were doing, how their sports is going, how their school life is going. So then those like a very brief chatting makes me really like high energy to start up my work every day. So I miss that very short conversation a lot actually. And then I will miss it a lot forever. And for Easy, you should remember how he loves you, how much he loves you, and you shouldn't forget about that. I know he was pushing you about sports a lot. I knew it, but that's the way how he loves you, right? So you should remember. Jim, in there, please enjoy every moment of your life, and you will be really missed with us, from us, and all of the people around here. I'll miss you. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to have a brief reading from a member of the family, Howie, family friend. Come on up.
So I'm Howie. I'm a friend of Karen's from high school in Suriname. And I believe that after high school, most of us, well, quite a few of us went abroad because there were no real opportunities for higher or scientific education in Suriname. Mainly to the US and to the Netherlands, I believe the students went. I ended up at the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, and Karen went to the United States. And I was introduced to Jim, I believe, but when was that, in 1997 or 6, something like that, when I attended the conference in the field of electrical engineering with a friend in Vegas. Of course, we went to see Karen, was introduced to Jim, he took us out, great fun. We even went for a day hike, and I remember this huge slope, this hill we needed to climb at the beginning of the hike. Jim was up there within 15 minutes, and I believe I arrived the next day. The man was a powerhouse. So I arrived, I believe, Friday afternoon from the Netherlands, and I will read to you the words written by a very close friend of Jim's, Tab Murphy. So bear with me. Jim, my friend, my brother, my fellow adventurer, this is going to be one of the most difficult things I've ever had to write. Because I believed, as did everyone at this gathering, as did you yourself for the longest time, that you would beat it and that we wouldn't be here today mourning the loss of someone taken far too early from us. You weren't ready to go, not by a long shot. And none of us were ready for you to go. And now we are all left with holes in our hearts and our lives that we must somehow move forward with. And that is the hardest part, Jim, thinking about a world without you in it. Your career is well documented by the extraordinary accomplishments and the admiration of many colleagues in your field. But I knew you in a much earlier chapter of our lives, in your 20s and 30s, when you were figuring out life and embarking on your career choice. We spent a lot of time together during these years, forging a bond that was far deeper than mere brothers-in-law. We became brothers. As close as brothers can be. You shared your hopes and dreams and fears and frustrations with me, often while sitting together on some mountain peak in the high Sierras, or fishing some pristine, unexplored lake, or lying in sleeping bags beneath a canopy of stars. But most of all, we laughed. And your laugh, Jim, well, anyone will tell you it was one of your most endearing qualities. It came easily, often, and was as distinctive as the day is long. I can hear it now as I write these words, and I will hear it for the rest of my life. And I hope there will come a day when I do hear it in my mind, that easy laugh of yours, but I will smile fondly and not feel so damn sad. There are many stories, many laughs, many hijinks I could share, but perhaps it's too soon for that. Perhaps the important thing today is to share about the last time we saw one another. About a year ago, you were in LA for a doctor appointment. I drove down to Santa Monica, parked, waited on a car, and you picked me up. We drove up Pacific Coast Highway together under a glorious blue sky to an outdoor restaurant we both liked. We sat at a picnic table, the winter sun warm on our shoulders, and ate lunch. We shared a few beers, and you talked about being a husband and father, and how these years were the most joyful of your life. We compared that notes. You bragged endlessly about Izzy, told stories, and we laughed. Dad bragged about you, Izzy. Just like the old days. And there was no room at the table that day for your illness. And I marveled at the man who you had become. You fulfilled your promise in every way, Jim, both professionally and personally. And later, when we hugged goodbye, neither of us believed that would be the last time we would see one another. But it was. I suppose I could rail angrily against the unfairness of life. Instead, I think I'll choose to cherish the time I had with you, both in the earlier chapter of our lives and these later years. I will carry forward memories, the laughter, and the adventures we shared. And by doing so, I will keep you alive in my heart, as many others will. Safe travels, Jim, friend, brother, husband, father, fellow adventurer. See you on the other side. These are the words of Pat Mills.
Next up are a couple of Jim's nephews, Joey and Jim. They have said the Alfanos mixed up those names a little bit. I don't want to spread them. I don't want to go, I can go out on a limb there with names. Come on.
Yeah, so he was Uncle Jim. This is Jimmy, and I have another Uncle Jim. But we're all well and good. Yeah. So I was told this week that I was asked if I would like to read this with Jimmy, just a poem that Uncle Jim chose to live his life by. I hadn't read this poem before this week, but when I did, it really made sense to who he was. And I think that you can find it on the back of your program. I'm just going to read it out loud. It's Desiderata by Max Ehrmann. Go placidly amid the noise and the haste, and remember what peace there may be in silence. As far as possible without surrender, be on good terms with all persons. Speak your truth quietly and clearly, and listen to others. Even the dull and the ignorant, they too have their story. Avoid loud and aggressive persons. They are vexations to the spirit. If you compare yourselves with others, you may become vain and bitter. For always there will be greater and lesser persons than yourself. Enjoy your achievements as well as your plans. Keep interested in your own career, however humble. It is a real possession in the changing fortunes of time. Exercise caution in your business affairs, for the world is full of trickery. But let this not blind you to what virtue there is. Many persons strive for high ideals, and everywhere life is full of heroism. Be yourself. Especially do not feign affection. Neither be cynical about love, for in the face of all aridity and disenchantment, it is as perennial as the grass. Take kindly the counsel of the years, gracefully surrendering the things of youth. Nurture strength of spirit to shield you in sudden misfortune, but do not distress yourself with dark imaginings. Many fears are born of fatigue and loneliness. Beyond a wholesome discipline, be gentle with yourself. You are a child of the universe. No less than the trees and the stars, you have a right to be here. And whether or not it is clear to you, no doubt, the universe is unfolding as it should. Therefore, be at peace with God, whatever you conceive him to be, and whatever your labors and aspirations in the noisy confusion of life, keep peace with your soul. With all its sham, drudgery, and broken dreams, it's still a beautiful world. Be cheerful. Strive to be happy.
Now is one of Jim's older sisters, Mary Ann.
Hello, everyone. Boy, what a touching tribute. Thanks for being here today in honor of my brother Jim. Well, it wasn't supposed to happen like this. Or I would have thought, if anything, it would have been the other way around. After all, I was his big sister. And he was the baby of the family. gee, I'm already crying. Anyways, and this is very, very difficult. So, Jim came from a big family. In the 6.5 years between us, there was me, Victor, Joey, and Joni, and finally baby Jimmy. We grew up in a crowded house, lots of noise and laughter and mischief. Most of the time we had a motley crew of other friends sleeping over. In other words, your large, typical Southern California family in the 70s. It's probably isn't a surprise that little Jimmy was quite the prankster. In fact, he was a master at creating havoc. As soon as you heard him laughing, his funny little kid laugh, see, watch out, he'd be up to something. If you were lying by the pool reading, he'd cannonball right next to you, or then there was his absolutely awful trick of doing headstands on the couch and farting. If ever you had a friend over, especially a boy, maybe the worst of all for me was when he read my diary and used it to blackmail me for a whole year, actually years. However, for all his wicked little brother ways, he couldn't help but be adorable because even as a kid, Jim had a certain charisma. He was the one in the family who took the necessary risks to reach his goals. And he was always so tender-hearted when it came to those he loved. So, well, this childhood sensitivity crystallized and showed up in adult Jim with his crazy love of animals, dogs especially. Well, this is certainly a familiar trait. I mean, all of us Alfanos have a ridiculous love of animals. Jim took it to extreme levels. Well, at WSU, he had a Rhodesian Ridgeback named Jake, as you guys have heard about already, who not only bit a few people, including our niece Taylor, but also killed a neighbor's pet goat, which was horrible. Animal control gave him the ultimatum of muzzling Jake or moving out of town. So Jim moved to a farm area where Jake proceeded to attack his new neighbor, a mule. The mule was a much tougher match than the poor goat and kicked Jake, breaking his jaw. So instead of putting him down, Jim actually found a vet willing to fix Jake's jaw using a metal plate. Vet bills be damned. Along with Jake, there were many other dogs over Jim's lifetime. Chipper, Josh, a stray he found on Easter Sunday, Rex, Tucker, Chet, and finally the little Frenchie Cookie. Jim loved them all. So, well, what else? Well, I remember visiting Jim at Cornell while he was working on his postdoc, November of '93. Jim was really excited about this young woman he had begun seeing. One night, Jim, Karen, and I met for dinner at the Moosewood Cafe. She made quite an impression on me. She was pretty with an easy smile and a kind demeanor. She was from a South American country I'd never heard of, Suriname. Right then and there, I knew Jim had met his match. Karen was his girl. As he told me, she was the real thing, the keeper, and she certainly was. Over the years, Jim and I kept close with almost daily phone calls. Then later, sometimes with texts. I always preferred his calls because I loved to hear Jim's voice. It had such a distinct timbre, a reassuring voice like our dad's. Most of our conversations were of the Seinfeld nature. Conversations about nothing whatsoever. He'd ask if I talked to Mom, who he also called most days, or what was going on with Joni, Vic, or Joey. But there were some significant conversations that stand out. One in particular was when Jim called to say that Karen was pregnant. It was fall in Anchorage, Alaska, and I pulled off into a parking lot. I was so excited. Jim was thrilled. He kept saying, I just hope it's a girl. And when they knew it was going to be a girl, the polling began over names. Of course, we all had our opinions and as to the perfect name for Jim and Karen's kid. It got pretty heated for a while, but ultimately, to our sister's satisfaction, Isabella, or Izzy, won out. And pretty soon, our conversations were about babies. Later on, Jim would often hear when Jim called, I'd often usually hear kid music playing. And then it would be Jim and Izzy on speakerphone. Jim fully embraced his role as a dad. His became a world of soccer games, Selena Gomez, sleepovers, and going for smoothies with a flock of little girls. Suddenly he was up on all the Disney films, and when I'd visit, instead of coffee and CNN, it'd be coffee and cupcake wars. All the more beautiful is that when I look into Izzy's big brown eyes now, I can blink and see a little Jim gazing back at me. But then there was the 4:30 in the morning call, and I heard with my foggy brain Jim saying that he may have cancer. And I'm sure a lot of you have had a phone call like this. It's a call that changes everything and casts quite the forever shadow. Even so, Jim's natural optimism and his verb rallying him on, we saw more of each other. As Ricky Lee Jones once wrote, you never know when you're making a memory. And there was certainly the case for all of us. Lots of precious and bittersweet memories were made during these years. Until the very end, we all had a fervent hope that he would, in Jim's words, stay on the planet. And if anyone, it would be him. This became my mantra. For Jim had the spirit of someone who could defy the worst odds. And I just didn't go that way. So the last time I spent a full day with Jim, it was 11/17, my birthday. He had lost his voice, but still, he got real close. You can hear him whisper. The last words he said to me on that day were, well, he whispered into my ear, said, you are a good sister. Well, Jim, if you're listening, I just want you to know that you were a very, very good brother, and we all miss you so much.
Okay, now is Karen Van Dyke, the rock of the family. Come on, come on. Okay.
Thank you all for joining in the celebration of Jim. I also would like to take this opportunity to thank all who have helped in organizing this, your sharing of reflections on Jim, and the many who have helped my family, especially during the past year when the going got pretty tough. Izzy and I deeply appreciate you. I would like to share briefly a few of the many reasons I find to celebrate Jim. The love of my life and the father of our amazing child, Izzy. My journey with Jim started in 1993, as all of you have heard already. I was a graduate student at Cornell University, and Jim had started his postdoctoral tenure in the Colmar lab. My first impressions of Jim were very similar to how his fellow lab mate, Magdalene Lindeberg, described him recently. And I'll quote, Jim appeared in the Colmar lab, his large frame filling the door and looking in his ski jacket and wind pants like he had just pushed the rental truck over the Rockies. Towing his Jeep with Jake in it. She so accurately described the first impression he made on Manny, the tall guy that definitely seemed invincible. But his frame paled in comparison to his spirit and his mind. And it is these two, his spirit and mind, who didn't fail him in the end. Jim left this world fighting an incredibly spirited and courageous battle to try to stay on this earth. And even in the last days, he was completely with it mentally. And for that, I'm very thankful. I believe that our relationship was one in which we made each other whole. Jim made me more daring, confident, and stronger, and I believe I softened and grounded Jim. Jim and I climbed many mountains, both literally and figuratively. We reached many peaks and hit plenty of valleys. But we finally reached the peak we had been searching for when our Issy came into the world. Issy completed us. Issy was completely adored by her dad and transformed him into the amazing father he was. Prior to Issy, Jim and I moved around quite a bit. Jim was somewhat restless, never really ready to settle and feel like a place was our true home. His dream had been to live somewhere near the ocean, preferably in California, and we landed smack dab in the middle of the country, as far away from an ocean as you can be. But Issy changed that. She helped him realize that home is where your family is, no matter where that is. He found his inner child. As a dad, he was ready to do things he wouldn't have never done before and enjoy them. When Issy was still very young, Jim would play Barbies with Issy. There always was some laughter and lots of high and low voices coming from the bathroom when Issy was taking her bath. And they were playing some kind of pretend play with her little dolls. Jim is also the one who would take Issy shopping, be it for presents for her friends or clothes or something new for her room or just to go for some ice cream. They would usually come back with way too much stuff. Issy and her best friend Marina also convinced him quite often to take them to do something like to get their nails done. They would leave the house blasting the music, all singing to the latest tunes Issy and Marina liked. And then he would just hang out with them, sitting in one of the chairs next to them, talking about this and that. One thing I don't think they ever convinced him to do, though, is for him to get his nails done. I know they tried, but Issy did paint his nails at home once in a while. Jim's love and caring for Issy was intense. Issy, I have said this before. Please know that you received more love and caring from Dad in your 12 years of life than many of us will experience in a lifetime. For that, I'm so thankful, and I hope you will be able to draw on these memories for comfort and strength. So I can go on and share many examples of what made Jim so special to me. His generous soul, his contemplative nature, and yet him being an adrenaline junkie. His true interest in people, animals, and places. His kindness and his ability to acknowledge when he was wrong and to say sorry. But I will close now. My life with Jim was one lived with what we would say in Dutch, genietend met volle teugen, which means to live life to the fullest. Jim was my rock, my true love, my hero, and we gifted each other with our biggest treasure when we had Issy. I will forever cherish the many memories we made. Jim, I will love you always.
Father McCabe, want to come up and say a few words?
I'm Father McCabe, and I was graced to get to meet Jim and Izzy and Karen and Estelle and Joan, one of the sisters, and this has just been a really awesome time of celebration. Melissa was his PT, kind of to get him strong, and she's a member of our parish, and I'm pastor there just about a year. And she called and she said, I think Jim would want to have a visit from one of the priests. And so I said, I'll go. So I went over there and saw him, and man, he was determined, you know. He was really kind of doing his work. In fact, I was visiting with Melissa, and she said, oh boy, usually most people go 15 minutes, we quit. He would push her and said, no, not yet. And she said he got up to 45 minutes, and usually the more you do, the more you kind of get weak. He was getting stronger. So, you know, I caught that determination. Then we kind of cleared out the room a little bit with Karen, and it was just me and Jim. And we went through a little bit on him being a brother, him being a son, him being a husband, and him being a dad. And just really how grateful he was to God for those special gifts in his life, which has been certainly carried out by so many beautiful voices today. There's a line in our faith that talks about Jesus saying that, you know, it's the vine and the branches. And a lot of times the branches gets the fruit. So, and the vine, of course, supplies it to it. And so I think many times, you know, we're busy doing God's work in our families, in our workplace, in all of the areas of our life, and yet all of them really are a gift from God. All of them. And it's our hope, you know, we celebrate, many of us in the Christian faith, Bethlehem and Easter, that the Lord loved us so much that he was going to show us how to live an earthly life to the fullest with love and mercy and kindness and intelligence and science and all these things to help people. But then at the end, the great God who created the universe and the great God that gave him a heart for a dad, that he has our back eternally. Some get to be blessed, yes, and live 99 years. We wish we could, in good health, and maybe die in our sleep with our family around us. But that's just not how it all works. And so that's part of a cross. And yet, I think Jim came to the realization, definitely, even you fight for everything, but you're always grateful to God. And, you know, whether we're in the media, sometimes where you see Carol Burnett, she's pulling on her ear and pointing up to heaven, or Jack Nicklaus is at the Masters and he's tipping his hat to Arnold Palmer. Most people on this earth, of course, hope and believe that the God who gives us good life down here on earth will help us eternally. So that was kind of the first little meeting with us. And then Karen called a second time when we were getting close for Jesus to come and take him to a dad and a mom, a father-in-law, and those who'd gone ahead of him. And I've been a priest a long, long time. That was such a sacred, holy, and yet kind of a tough moment. But Izzy had her dad in her like you would not believe. He was, yes, very independent the first time, very much a fighter, wanting to provide. But it was the Lord taking all these gifts kind of away from him, and his family took over. And Izzy was the caretaker, and just so beautiful, helping her papa towards the very end. Of course, his dear wife Karen, and Estelle, and Joan, and Cookie too. The last pet was Cookie, and that was a spirited dog. So it'll be our prayer that, yes, memories, absolutely. and great seeds that he planted and trees that have been growing in the science world at UNL. But not only that, but that there's a thin little veil between heaven and earth, and that our prayers, our love, our thoughts, our praying to them, talking to them, all of these things are what God gives us until we all meet again. Somebody said, I can't wait for about 120 years from now. It was like, what's going to go on at 120? Everybody I knew and loved and cared for will be back again. So let us pray. Heavenly Father, we do thank you for the beautiful gift of Jim and his life, his role as a son, a brother, a dad, and a husband. And as he completed his work on earth, may now his life begin in heaven, and may he wear the red up there, and may he continue to be absolutely involved in his family's life, through his heart, through his love. And may we all continue to be better people for knowing Jim. And some of those attributes that he had so well, may we try to mentor in our own life. Eternal rest grant unto Jim, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon him. May Jim rest in peace. Amen.
Okay, so that was all the planned speakers. I just want to make one announcement. Alan, if you can get together with whoever current and former members of Jim's Lab, we'd like to get one photo somewhere before you go. We'd like to try to get that. If there's anybody else who'd want to say something, if there's somebody, I'm not sure if there's anybody on Zoom, we could do something real quick, or if anyone's still compelled to say something, please do. If not, that's fine too. We thank you again for coming and sharing this moment in celebration of Jim Alfano's life. There's not much more I can say.
And the rocks might melt, and the sea may burn. Some say life beat you down, break your heart, steal your crown. So start it out for God knows where. I guess I'll know when I get there. Learning to fly around the clouds. What goes up must come down. mountain I have to climb. Oh yeah, to reach there. Lord, my body has been a good friend, but I won't need it when I reach the end. And I'm miles from nowhere. Yes, I'll take my time. Oh yeah, to reach there. I creep through the valleys and I broke through the woods. 'Cause I know when I find you, my honey, it's gonna make me feel good. Yes, I love everything. So don't it make you feel sad? 'Cause I'll drink to you, my baby. I'll drink to that. I'll drink to that. Miles from nowhere, not a soul in sight. Oh yeah, but it's all right. I have my freedom. I can make my own rules. Oh yeah, the ones that I choose. Lord, my body has been a good friend, but I won't need it when I reach the end. And I'm miles from nowhere. Yes, I'll take my time. Oh yeah, to reach there. I love everything, so don't it make you feel sad? 'Cause I'll drink to you, my baby. I'll drink to that. I'll drink to that. Miles from nowhere. Yes, I'll take my time. Oh yeah, to reach there.